Hi, everyone. My name is Faye Cooper, and I'm the social emotional counselor for Iowa Colony High School, Fairview Junior High, Caffey Junior High, and Harvey sixth graders at Hood Case. And joining me today are the other SEL counselors, Heather Benbrook and Ashley Gully. So we had a presentation called Helping Children with Loss for Parent University, and unfortunately, we were not able to record it. However, we want to give you a brief overview and some key takeaways that were discussed that day. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so what we want to present to you is what is grief? What are different types of losses? What are the myths associated with grief? What are STIRBs? What are tips and hints? And what is support for grievers? Okay, so what is grief? So grief is the normal and natural reaction to significant emotional loss of any kind. I want you to pay close attention to those keywords, significant emotional loss. Many people have an idea that grief is caused by just death, but there's so many other losses that can cause grief, and we'll get into those in just a bit. Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. So think about a person who died due to a terminal illness. Although the family is deeply saddened by the death of their loved one, they may feel relief that they are no longer in pain. And so that's what I mean by conflicting feelings. Grief is the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations. So I had a student the other day whose father died 3 years ago. It had just hit her that he wouldn't be there for her graduation, to walk her down the aisle, or to be a grandfather for her children. So those hopes, those dreams, those expectations, they were gone at that moment. Okay, so I want you to look at these losses that may cause grief. We have death, divorce, retirement, moving, pet loss, financial changes, whether it's an increase or a decrease, loss of health, legal problems, empty nest, end of addiction, starting school, loss of trust, loss of safety, loss of control, loss of faith, loss of fertility, loss of self, and there are so many more. But as you can see, with every one of these events, there's either an emotional connection, loss of hope, loss of dreams, or loss of expectations. We're going to go ahead and have Ashley Gully go next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Gully. I am the SEL counselor for Shadow Creek High School, McNair, and Nolan Bryan Junior Highs. And so I'm going to talk to you about the myths that we have associated with grief. These are things that we have learned by watching others' behaviors over the years. No one has came to us and told us, like, this is how you're supposed to grieve. These are things that you're supposed to do. But just as a society, we have adopted these 6 myths surrounding grief. And this is normally how we will react in order to cope with feeling those uncomfortable emotions that are associated with grief. The first one is don't feel bad. So this is an intellectual statement, but it's not helpful to a person that's grieving. And so don't feel bad essentially is telling the person, like, find the silver lining in the loss. Like, yeah, if you're moving, because moving is a type of loss. So when you're moving your family, you may tell your kids, yes, you're going to miss your old friends, but you'll be able to make brand new friends and you'll have a new school and you'll have a chance to start over. And so you're telling them, like, don't feel bad for, missing your old school, your old friends, because you have an opportunity to do something so much more. But when you do that, you're kind of not acknowledging the feelings that they have, like that sadness that they have, that they are going to miss their friends. They're going to miss that sense of normalcy. They're going to miss those things that they know, and they're moving to an unknown. So when we do that, we are negating those kind of emotions that may be negative, and we're telling kids that it's not okay for them to feel it. By the time a kid has hit high school, they have heard don't feel bad at least 23,000 times. So that becomes an automatic thought in our kids' heads. When something is sad or painful, they automatically tell themselves, don't feel bad. Let me look for something I can be grateful for, which is a good tool. But they also have to acknowledge that there is some hurt and some sadness associated with whatever that situation is. The second myth is replace the loss. So replacing the loss does not remove the feelings that are attached to the loss. All it does, it just replaces it for a moment. It's only temporary. So think of a woman or a man who's broken up with their significant other. Their friends come over and they're like, hey, we're going to drown our sorrows away in a pint of ice cream. And so what we're doing is we're replacing those sad feelings with food, with something that we find joy in. And so oftentimes people will try to replace those losses with objects like food, or it may be drugs, it may be something like that, because it just takes the edge off for just a second. Or even thinking about it in terms of our kiddos, if they lose their goldfish or their goldfish dies, we're going to run out and we're going to hurry up and get another goldfish and hurry up and try to replace it. But what we can't replace is the relationship that they had with that object or that individual. So replacing the loss only temporarily numbs the feelings, and it does not let the person actually work through the feelings that they have in order to heal. Number three is grieve alone. Grieve alone is one that we see a lot. A lot of our kids, they don't want to cry in front of us, or we don't want to cry in front of our kids and show all that extra emotion. While it is so difficult to watch a loved one in pain, we need to understand that grief, like responding to grief, is natural, it's normal. And so we need to let our loved ones know that it's normal to cry, it's normal to feel upset, it's normal to do all of those things. It just communicates that you felt something, you know? And if we allow people to grieve alone, it encourages them to hide their feelings from us. It just tells them that it's not safe to feel with other people. And to speak on that, I spoke about The Stages of Grief by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. We're normally introduced that there are stages to grief, that you go through anger, denial, acceptance, all of those that cycle of grief, but that is a myth as well. There are no stages or cycles to grief. Every person's experience with grief is different, is unique. And that actual cycle that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross created was for terminally ill patients coming to terms with their illness, and it cannot be applied to grief. So we don't want to box people into following those cycles of grief. The next myth is be strong. Be strong is a hard one. It's not being strong for ourselves, it's being strong for others around us. The problem with being strong is that we can't be strong and be human. Humans are designed to feel emotion, and real strength comes from experiencing every emotion, whether we think it's negative and or positive. Keeping busy is another one. We try to get back to our normal activity as quickly as possible. So let's go ahead. Let's get back to school. Let's get back to work. Let's get back to doing those things we normally do. And all it does is bury the emotion. It buries the natural emotion to grief. It can cause us more stress and heartache if we're not a naturally busy person. But in order to heal, you have to acknowledge what you feel. So you can't heal it if you don't feel it. And the last one is time heals all wounds. So time does not heal all wounds. We all say, give it a little time, you'll be able to get over it. Give it a little time and it'll get better. But this does not mean that you will never feel sad or angry or hurt or lonely again. It just means that you're going to experience these emotions over time. Love transcends situations and time. So telling people, give it a little time, no, that's not going to heal what they're feeling. They need to be able to work through it. So action is required if you want to heal from grief. What we normally do, what we do or create in order to deal with those uncomfortable feelings of grief are called short-term energy relieving behaviors. And so here you'll see some of the things that we normally do in order to distract ourselves from those uncomfortable and intense feelings that are associated with grief. I should say that grief is experienced at 100%. There's no dial tone for grief. You cannot turn it down and only experience about 5% of it. No, you're going to feel 100% of it all at the time that you're experiencing it. So sometimes in order to relieve that energy, to have that energy go somewhere, we will maybe go out to eat. Hey, I'm gonna go out to eat and then I'll have a drink while I'm out. So alcohol, it numbs it. Food feels good. It nourishes my body. And so I want to engage in something that makes me feel good. Sometimes that may be tobacco or vaping. It can be drugs for some people. In our school, violence and bullying, we've heard that term that hurt people hurt people. And so sometimes the pain that I feel inside, the way that I get it out is by letting others know how it feels to hurt. And so I'm violent or I'm bullying other students just because I have such an immense pain inside. Think about COVID. When COVID came around and we were stuck in our houses and we could not connect with others, what did a lot of people do? They shopped. They got on Amazon. Amazon went to like $1 billion company during COVID because people needed a way to release their energy. Their energy had nowhere to go. And so they shopped or they watched TV. People try to connect by using social media and the internet. So look at the Zoom calls that we did and all of that other stuff. We were trying to find ways to release that energy that was built up due to that loss of safety and that loss of connection during that time. Sometimes relieving that energy looks like sex, porn, or masturbation. So if we're wondering why we see that a lot in our high school or maybe junior high kids around that age, sometimes the loneliness that they feel also leads them to believe that they're not loved. And so, what is sex is a form of intimacy. It makes me feel close to someone. The only thing with that is it's fleeting, it's temporary. And so, I have to engage in it over and over and over again in order to recreate that feeling. And so, now this becomes a term or a way for me to cope with some of the feelings I have surrounding loss. Cutting, body piercings, and tattoos. So, cutting is a way for students to physically release the pain. So, since I can't tell you where I'm hurting in my body, I may cut so that there's a physical release of the pain because I can say, oh, this cut hurts here, rather than tell you where on my body or try to explain to you how my heart is broken. And body piercings and tattoos, those are just more socially acceptable ways of releasing energy when we're feeling stressed or those energies that are associated with grief and loss.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather Bimbrick. I am the SEL counselor for Alvin High School, Alvin Junior High, and Harvey Junior High, 7th and 8th grade campus. And the part that we wanted you to kind of leave off with today are some tips and hints, some aha moments, things to take away that'll really be helpful in helping yourself and helping others or your children when they are grieving. The first one is to listen with your heart and not your head. There's about 12 inches from your brain to your heart, approximately. And it seems like a short distance, but it can be a really hard journey to take. And when you're thinking about listening with your heart, if you think about a visual, picture a heart with two ears. And just to be there, to have empathy, to listen, and just to be mindful and present with a person when they are grieving, and to focus on the emotional aspects of grief, which kind of lends us to our second one, to recognize that grief is emotional and not intellectual. If we try to rationalize grief, sometimes it's not going to make sense to us because it is emotional. It's more in the amygdala and in the middle part of our emotional brain. And it's definitely an emotional process. Grief is tied with those emotions. And so when we try to intellectualize it or to understand it and kind of like break it apart and understand it a little bit deeper, it's not intellectual. We don't understand it because it is so individualized and it's so different for each person that experiences grief. So remember to focus on the emotional part of grief. The third one is to remember that you are the adult. You can go first, and it's okay. It's not selfish. I know it's cliche. I know that it's kind of overused a little bit. But when you think about driving or riding in an airplane and the masks come down, and they tell you that part every time you fly, you have to put your mask on first. And that's not because they just want you to take care of yourself. It's not because of selfish reasons. It's because you can't help the people around you. You can't help your children on the plane if you don't have your mask on because you'll be in a stressful situation. And so you're not going to be able to rationalize or think clearly through that moment. And so putting your mask on first and taking care of yourself and grieving yourself will help not only you to help your children and other people, but also to kind of help you rationalize your own grief and work through that own grief as well. The next one is each child is unique and has a unique relationship to the loss. And it says child here, but it really can be generalized to individuals, just people in general. We're human, right? And we're all different and unique in our own experiences. And so, with that one, just remember that everybody's going to process it a little bit differently. We're all going to have a different process, a different reaction, whether that's emotional or intellectual, with our thoughts or with our feelings. And so, remember that one child, let's say you have multiple children in your family unit, and that one is grieving and having an extreme emotional reaction to that, and then one is not at all, that's okay, because it is going to be different for each person. The next one is to be patient. Don't force them to talk. We want to make sure that we don't try to force or push something that they're not ready for, first of all, because sometimes you'll see that one child might want to talk about it and one is just shut down or withdrawn. And sometimes that's a normal reaction to grief. It just depends on the person. But if we try to force them to talk about it, it could re-traumatize them a little bit, or it could go into leading them into kind of like being guided or led to something that they're not really feeling, kind of like a false story to them as well. So they are going to be ready to talk when they're ready to talk. If they're ready to talk. And some kids might not want to talk about it. They might want to play, or they might want to express it through different means like art or music or other different expressions that they might want to talk about or to express it with. So just remember not to be forceful with that. And the last one is never say, don't feel sad, don't feel scared. Kind of goes back to what Ashley was saying with the myths, right? We hear this so often, don't feel this way. Well, then when we feel that way, we have a negative connotation with it. And so we're not going to want to express those feelings because we see, oh, okay, don't feel this way. Oh, okay, I got to push that down. I got to bottle it up. And so when we do that, we negate their feelings. So, those are the main tips and hints that we have for you. And the last thing we want to do is talk about help and support for grievers. Sometimes we don't know what to say, and that's okay because there are no truly 100% words to say that are going to help everybody. However, we do have some examples of things that you could do to be helpful, and things that you can do to help yourself as well. So the first one is just rephrasing and reframing the way we say things about grief or kind of talk to people about grief. And the first one says, I can't imagine how painful, sad, hurtful that must be for you. Okay, whatever the emotion is, and kind of reflect those feelings that they're feeling, but just being in that moment with them and understanding that they are feeling this way. So just giving it a name so we can work through that and kind of tame that as well. And just know that when you're in that relationship and you're in that moment with them, it's going to be unique for them, and you're just going to be there and be present, so they're going to feel that you're connected with them versus trying to give them advice and different things like that. Which kind of brings us to the next one. I can't imagine how you feel. I know when I lost my grandpa, I felt lonely. Okay, so that's just an example, but it's okay to say that you don't understand exactly how they're feeling because you probably don't, and that's okay. So when you say that, you're not negating anything that they're feeling. You're just saying, you know what, I'm here with you. I have empathy for you. And then this is how I felt in another situation. You're not taking away from their feelings. You're just letting them know that, you know what, I have felt a similar way before, and that's going to relate to them, and they're going to connect with that as well. And so that gives them the opening to be able to talk about more openly and understand that, you know what, maybe this person does understand as well. And the last thing, again, listen with your heart. Remember, the heart is broken, the head is not. So when we have grief, we are listening with our heart, we're being open, we're being empathetic. And when I say listening, I'm talking about active listening, not just hearing, but listening with empathy and with understanding. And so remember that this is not an intellectual process, this is an emotional process, and people don't want to be judged, right? We all have emotions, we all have feelings, and we don't want to be judged in those moments where we do have those struggles, because then it's going to want our brains to kind of shut that down if it happens again in the future. So just listening, being there, being present, being mindful in the moment. All right. So that is what we have for you on grief today and helping children grieve. This is a resource. We have gone through a training that was amazing. I would say life changing. And one of the books that the Grief Recovery Institute has is called When Children Grieve. It's there, and the QR code is there as well. It's about $10. Really good read. There are some other books as well from the Grief Recovery Institute, the Grief Recovery Handbook, that helps you process your own grief, that are really good resources as well. Also, we will be sharing out some other resources along with the video that we're sharing now, and some resources for local counseling opportunities if you need that, or some different emotional activities and things that you can do with kids as well. So it was so great to be able to share this with you today. If you ever have any questions or need any other additional resources, feel free to reach out to any of us. Have a great day, guys.